Welcome. Thanks for coming out on a Friday in December. My name is Jana Schmidt. I'm the Director of Programs at the Hannah Arendt Center for Politics and Humanities. And I run a series together with the student fellows of talks. And it is my pleasure to introduce that series now before we hear from our first speaker in the series. So the fellows and I began this series with the impulse to think our current moment. We wanted to do three things: think about ways of acting in the world, amplify voices outside or to the side of the academy, and realize our own agency as political actors in the world. We started with a text sort of to ground us by the eminent British psychoanalyst Jacqueline Rose, who in her latest book on violence and on violence against women links the repeal of abortion access in the United States to other forms of state-sponsored and institutional violence around immigration, healthcare, foreign policy, and sexuality. She argues that violence is born of a rift between act and understanding. And she decries a peculiar form of blindness by which the brutal effects of violence remain invisible to their initiators. And her answer to this kind of blindness and to the rift between act and understanding is very Arendtian in a way. And in fact, she cites the famous "to think what we are doing." So a kind of like stop and think, step back before you act. The idea of autonomies, the new speaker series at the Hannah Arendt Center, harkens back in some way, flirts with the idea of autonome. So these European subcultures of radical workers, women's, and anarchist movements in the 1970s, mainly in Italy, Germany, France, whose goal was to create spaces for self-determination and communal action. Autonomies is a series of the Hannah Arendt Center organized by and for students. Uniquely on this campus, and I think on many other college campuses, the student fellows decide on who to invite and who run the events. It therefore seems quite fitting that this series is about autonomy, about the current crisis of autonomy, about the problematic resonances of the word autonomy with acting in isolation, but also about the chance of seeing autonomy as something that thrives under conditions of plurality. The first theme for this and the next semester is reproductive justice, a topic that I think is weighing heavily on all of our minds in the wake of the repeal. How we can think through what happened there and how we might take action in response are the questions we will be concerned with in the speaker series. So I'm now handing the introduction of Holly Melgard over to Maggie Hugh, who will be introducing the first speaker of the series.
Good afternoon. It's with great pleasure that I introduce you to the first speaker of Autonomies and Reproductive Justice. I'm going to say a few words about her work and accomplishments, and then if this event and language does its job, I hope you'll forget that I ever came up here and spoke to you, because I want your minds to be swirling with your own thoughts and impressions and hopefully calls to action from what is presented to you this afternoon. Holly Melgard is a poet whose most recent book, Fetal Position, was named by Jackie S. as one of Artforum's best books of 2021. It is her first book published with an outside editor, as she has been self-publishing for a decade on Troll Thread Press, a site that collectively publishes poetry books in the form of both print-on-demand and free PDF downloads. She's one of the founding editors of Troll Thread Press. On Troll Thread, she's published Bacon Trilogy, The Making of the Americans, Black Friday, and as well as co-authored with Yuris Gozin, White Trash and Liquidation. She has a book of selected poems forthcoming in the spring of 2023 from Ugly Duckling Press. She has a PhD from Poetics from SUNY Buffalo, and she teaches at NYU and CUNY. This afternoon, she'll be reading to you from her book, Fetal Position, which presents a formal exploration of nascent forms of labor and the scenes of their emergence. And I urge you afterwards to go home and read more of her work, as you've just learned, and it's readily available on the internet.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for the beautiful introduction, and Yana for putting this series together. Like, it's such an honor to be included in a series like this, in this moment. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so today I'm gonna read to you from my book, Fetal Position, which just came out last year, and which I wrote over the first 10 years of my own emergence as a poet. So these are poems that I was writing as I was putting work out, free print-on-demand PDF online. These were also works I was making over the course of that period. And in honor of this occasion to be part of this discussion about the corrosion of reproductive rights, between the poems I read, I'm gonna tell you guys about what was happening with me in the history I lived surrounding the making of this book, corresponding to this discussion we're having about reproductive justice. It's easier to talk about ruptures we survive in retrospect than while experiencing them in the present, and the disjunct, of course, you'll hear between the narrative I have about those poems and the poems themselves. These poems will show you the language I did manage to produce in relation to those ruptures, and the commentary in between will, of course, fill in the blanks of that history. But before I begin, I should say that I have always hated and still dislike very much explaining what poems are supposed to mean to people. And that's because I hate pretending that exposition can fully comprehend what poems themselves say. I believe that whatever someone gets from a poem in itself is the valid takeaway of that poem. Like, poetry exists in the moment that it's formed in the mouth. And I don't believe that there's a wrong or right way to get a poem. So I'll be eager to hear from you guys what you get from these poems when we get to the Q&A. So please know that as I discuss the making of this work, that I don't want you to conflate the story of my biography with the sense that the poems themselves might make for you as you listen to them. Poems are able to say all kinds of things that expository writing can't, because there are all kinds of formal rules that narration must adhere to in order to be followable, that poems just aren't obligated to follow, and that's like their facility, that's their asset. So I invite you to listen to the differences between modes as I read and talk today, and just know that the kind of exploration of the context of reproductive injustice surrounding the work is kind of to enrich this conversation with the theme running through the work, but not really to substitute an understanding for the work itself. I believe that putting my own coordinates with reproductive justice in closer dialogue with my poems than I have in public forums before this is worth the exploration today, most of all because, as Mark Fisher says in his essay, Anti-Therapy, the section titled, Capital is More Real Than You Are, There is No Such Thing as the Autonomous Individual. Were you reading this when you made this series? Because I'm like, it's too perfect. I was like, I had to bring this quote. He says, talking about our feelings can become a political act when it is part of a practice of consciousness raising that makes visible the interpersonal and intersubjective structures that ideology normally obscures from us. Any individual therapy, even that are practiced by a sympathetic and politically progressive therapist, can only ever have limited effects. In order to really come to terms with the damage that has been done to them by and in the wider social field, individuals need to engage in collective practices that will reverse neoliberalism's privatization of stress. When we talk about the taking away of reproductive rights, since the overturning of Roe, a lot of the focus has been pointed at eliminating the choice to not have kids. And because it affects other states more than New York, the problem can feel more safely far away from us than I think it really is. The story I'll tell you today about the many ways I've battled to protect my own reproductive future against violence precedes the overturning of Roe and has taken place in blue states and in my own progressive, academic-based literary community. This country's tendency to shit on child-rearing labor goes back really far. It was partly in response to the many ways that my control over my reproductive future was undermined by capital before the Supreme Court decision that I made this book to intervene on this belief of this kind of violence, that this kind of violence only exists far away, as though only in red states or non-educated communities or amongst only cartoon villains who are conscious of the fact that they are bad people. The ubiquitous violence against maternal form affects all of us quite literally. While not all women want, have, or can have children, and while not all primary parents or caretakers are moms or female-identifying moms, every person was once born, and someone labored over the making of them as people. All of us labor over the becoming of us, and all of us make choices every day that do and don't subordinate the value of that labor to adjacent forms of capital. Fetal Position begins with 3 epigraphs. I'll start with just this one from Audre Lorde. It's in Poetry is Not a Luxury. She writes, "It is through poetry that we give name to those ideas which are, until the poem, nameless and formless, about to be birthed, but already felt. That distillation of experience from which true poetry springs birth thought, as dream births concept, as feeling births idea, as knowledge births or precedes understanding." I wrote Fetal Position during a historical period when precarity of our futures and our ability to have any agency to control them has only worsened in my lifetime, with income inequality only increasing, adjuncts like myself having no right to paternity leave. We aren't paid enough just to afford to support dependents in many of the gig economy, in much of the gig economy today. And the 8-hour, 5-day-a-week work week has all been corroded by this 24-hour connectivity that we now live in. A lot of ambient forces in my life have depleted my own agency to control my reproductive future, and has done so long before Roe was overturned. Luckily, poetry is an incredible technology for working through precisely these problems. The poem has a unique ability to translate into language the unremarkables, the unmentionables, and the unspeakable dimensions of violence in our world, including gender and reproductive violence. Even when the horror prevents us from communicating it clearly, because there are no rules in poetry, poetic language can absorb whatever there is to say in whatever form it takes without censoring or disqualifying it. The idea that poesis, the act of making, brings into sense nascent meaning was what brought me to dedicate my life to it as a study. The other 2 epigraphs in the book are, the first one is Sylvia Federici from Precarious Labor, a Feminist Viewpoint. She says, "The precarity of labor is rooted in the new forms of production." And the other is from Agamben's Infancy and History, when he writes, "That which has its place of origin in infancy must keep on traveling toward and through infancy." So I'm going to read to you now from Cat Call to start. It's the end of the book, but it's always fun to start.
Can everyone hear well?
Yeah, can you guys hear?
We have a mic.
We have a mic. I can shout. 1 second, get a big ass before we get into this. Okay. Oh my God, check out that guy over there. Oh my God, look at him. Look at what a guy he is. Hey, cute guy. Hey you. Hey, hi, cutie. How are you? He sure is cute. Oh my God, look at how cute he is. Holy shit, he's a cute one. Jesus Christ, look at him. Look at that guy being such a guy. Oh my God, what a guy. Talk about a guy. Hey guy. Yeah, you guy. Hi guy. Hey, you're a really cute guy. You sure are. Oh my God, he's a cute guy. Oh, he is a guy. He is, isn't he? Dude, just look at what a fucking guy he's being. He's just being a really cute little guy right now. Hey, cute one, look at you. You're a cute little guy, aren't you? You are. You're a huge, cute little guy. Yes, you are. The hugest. It's okay, I like that. I like you. Look at what a guy he's being. Look at him go. I'll bet he just needs to cuddle right now, and that's why he's being like that. He probably does. You know it's true. Hey, pretty big, cute little guy. Do you need to cuddle? Do you? Do you want to cuddle a little bit? Because I can cuddle. I can tell you're a cuddler. Oh, I can. You sure are. Look at this butt. A goddamn baby body. That's what he's got. Baby bod. bod? What's up, small bod? What's up, small baby bud? What's up with your small butt? Let me get your butt. Jesus Christ, look at this guy. Yeah, look at him over there with his small butt. Look at that baby butt he's got going on. Look at him go. Oh my God, look at you go. Hey, baby butt, can I please have your small butt now? Oh, come on, I want it now. It's okay, you can do this. You're just gonna need to give me your small butt right now, that's all. He's gonna need to give me his butt. That's what he's gonna need to do, and I'm gonna need to have him. Come on, little guy, come be my butt, be my bud. I'll be your friend. Come on. I'll bet you're fun. I'll bet he is fun. Yeah, I'll bet you're fun. You look like it. You look like you probably got one of those fun butts, don't you? Do you want to know how I know his butt is that fun? Because he's clearly the littlest. Clearly. Oh, he clearly is. It's true, he is that. Anyone that small has got to be from Littletown. Oh, he has to be. He just has to. He must. Yeah, I'll bet he is. In fact, I know he is. He is definitely the littlest one from Littletown, and that's where he's from. It's true. It's true. He is the littlest one from Littletown. He can't help it because he's that small. No, he can't help it. No. Hey, you little bud. Let me get your littlest fun, cute guy bod. I want your bod, little one. Yeah, he's definitely the littlest one from Littletown without Smallies being right now. It's true. That's how small he is. He is being that small. He is. He's so small, he probably calls it Littleton like he's really from there. You know he does. Hey, bud, where you going with your little bitty bod? Can I please have your bud bod? Come on. I want to have your bod now. Let me have it. Littleton. That's what the locals call it. All the locals in Littletown call it Littleton. It's true, they really do. That's how you know when they're really little enough to be a Littletonian, is when they're from Littletown. You know they're a real Littletonian when they call it Littleton. That's how they say it too, Littleton. They say it just like that. It's true, they do, Littleton. I mean, for fuck's sakes, look at him. He is definitely, without a doubt, the goddamn littlest Littletonian from Littletown, and that's what he is. I know it. Look at him calling it Littleton to himself in his head while he's walking there. Hey, Mr. Bitty Butt. Hey, you, yeah, you. Hey, Mr. Boo. Come on, come be my mister. For fuck's sakes, look at his small body headed back to his tiny home in Littletown as we speak, calling it Littleton, just like that, like it were nothing, saying it like that, like everyone else called it Littleton too, like everyone else in the world called it Littleton and not Littletown, which you know that any Littletonian doesn't mean a goddamn thing. What's up, baby sir? Want to come be my mister? Oh, come on, don't go. Take me with you. Maybe I can get him to take me back to Littletown with them. Hey, baby guy, take me back to Littleton with you. I want to meet your cute parents. There's just no way that anyone could ever be that small. It's just not possible. He's just being way too small to be this possible right now, and I don't like it. I'm sorry, but he's just way too small. Way too fucking small, and it's not okay. What the fuck? God damn him. Why does he have to be this small? I don't even know. No, I don't. No, I do not. This is too much. He's being way too much. I can't stand it. Hey, bub. Hey, Bubba. Hey, Bubba Butt. Hey, Butt Bub. Hey, you baby bub. Fuck you. Fuck you and your ridiculously small body. Your smallness needs to stop now. I said stop. No means no. Fuck this guy's body for being that small. Seriously? Fuck him. Fuck his insanely tiny body. Hey, Bud Bub. I'm gonna stop your body. Yes, I am. Someone needs to put a stop to all this smallness. I'm sorry, but his body just really needs to be stopped right now because there's just no way that anyone can be this small. No way, sir. No, you cannot be like this. No, you cannot. Nope, no way. Nobody's like that. Nobody. You know what, Fun Bud? I'm gonna need to touch your body with my body now. You're gonna need to let me, okay? So enough is enough. You need to come over here now and put your goddamn bod on top of my body and quit screwing around. I mean it this time. Hey, Mr. Guy, yeah, you, I'm talking to you. You're gonna be in my arms now because it's where you belong. Don't you walk away from me. You need to stop being so far away from my body. Come on, bud, give me your bod. There's just no point in fighting it because I'm gonna have you now, okay? Oh, come on, don't give me that. Come on. God damn this selfish guy. God damn him. Excuse me, sir? Hey, mister, sir. Over here, I'm right here. I need your butt. Give me your butt. Come over here. I need you now. Hey, it's okay. Unless it's one of your fun butts that's bothering you. I don't mind it. I like your butt. I like to bother your butt. What the fuck? Why is it like that? I mean, look at that butt. I totally want to cup his butt right now. That's what I want to do. Yeah, I want to do that to him now. What's up, baby butt? Let me get your butt. Let me get your butt. Let me cup your butt. I need to cup your butt right now. What do you think about that? Come on. Let's just cup butts for a minute. It'll only take a minute. Come on, let me cup you. Look at how smooth his butt looks. It's so smooth. You know the hairs on it are all soft and silky. He's probably got one of those rug butts that's too soft to give you rug burn, and that's how silky it is. Oh, come on, don't be like that. I just want to touch your soft butt. Hey, soft butt, it's okay if there's hair on it. I don't mind. I like a rough butt. I do. I really do. Oh, come on, don't be that way. Why is he being like this? Don't be like this. Come on, stop being this way. Don't be all cruddy. Don't you dare get all cruddy on me now. Don't do it. Stop being a cruddy buddy. Be my guy. Be my butt. It's okay. I'm not mad. Just don't be a crud butt. Man, he's not going to stop devastating me with his body, is he? Who even told him he could act like that? I don't even know. Hey, you, stop devastating me. You stop now. He needs to stop ruining me with his body right now. He does. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fucking ruin his life. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ruin him. I'm going to ruin his butt. I'm going to ruin his fucking rub butt. That's what I'm going to do. Hey, you. Yeah, you. You need to have your butt mugged. That's right. I'm going to mug your butt right now. I'm going to mug it. I'm going to mug your soft rub butt, okay? So that's an accelerated version of catcall. And to say a few words about it, I wrote this after moving to New York in 2014 when the culture of catcalling was kind of like more widely practiced there than it is now. This was just before the season of Me Too began, which kind of really began to pick up like around 2015 in early call-out culture on the internet, and then kind of took off from there. Catcalling was still an ambient form of violence that was unremarkable at that time in my community, and I didn't have space to process it while I was writing this. I wrote it by accident when I transcribed all the things I said to my cat in 1 month, sorted those things into thematic piles, and catcall became the pile of all the things I said that sounded like catcalling. In this poem, you can hear the pervasive way in which shit is shown to run downstream. In it, I'm processing this banal violence pointed at me through the way in which I give language to the one in my house who plays the role of the child. Humor has always been my coping mechanism, and saying out-of-pocket shit to my cat is my favorite outlet for processing the lifetime of trauma I've experienced. And I come from a family of working class, very mentally ill, practicing misogynists. My mom raised me to organize my life around serving the men in my family. My dad raised my brother to be like him, to beat and subjugate the women around him to secure his own emotional comfort. And my parents were both raised by moms who were not equipped to fully care for their own children because of the intergenerational impact that austerity can have on families like my own. My story is less unique than you would think, and having gotten as far as I have with a PhD is a coup where I come from. I wasn't read to as a kid. I was a C&D student. Growing up because I didn't have authorities, I didn't trust authorities like my teachers, and I didn't learn to read books for pleasure until I was 18 years old. I was guilted throughout graduate school for abandoning the men in my family and constantly pressured to drop out and return to the blue state where I was raised by a family of all liberal, democratic voting people. Before I wrote Catcall, I didn't notice the extent to which my own impulse to repeat violence by projecting my history onto my own child, the one in the house who was smaller than me, my cat Cran, was so alive in me until I discovered the results of this poem's experiment. It taught me to notice my own capacity for violence that is born of my feelings of victimization. So one of the epigraphs to this poem that I kind of added when I put it in the book is from Sarah Schulman's Conflict is Not Abuse. It goes, just as unresolved, formerly subordinated or traumatized individuals can collude with or identify with bullies, so can unresolved, formerly subordinated or traumatized groups of people identify with the supremacy of the state. In both cases, the lack of recognition that the past is not the present leads to the newly acquired power to punish, rather than the self-transformation necessary to resolve conflict and produce justice. So next I'm going to read to you Divisions of Labor, and it's in the book, but I'll read you from the more fun chapbook version. I designed the cover of it. I designed the cover of this too. I've designed the covers of all the books. Okay, so here's Divisions of Labor, and I'm just going to take a first sip of water because it's taxing. Divisions of Labor. I published this in 2020, but I wrote it long before that. I think I wrote it I don't know, maybe 2013. Okay, so here's Divisions of Labor. I put it out on Takedown a couple years ago. And it's organized like a children's alphabet book. anesthesia, asshole, ay, bah, baby boy, baby girl, baby is being born, baby is coming, baby is here, bah, bastard, you bastard, be a baby, birth, bitch, bah, bah. Boy, boyfriend, breastfeed, breathe, I am breathing, break it, broke it, just broke, cesarean, can you see it, can't, I can't, careful, cough, cervix, cocksucker, coming, it's coming, contracting, contractions, crap, C-section, damn it, daughter, dead, is it dead, die, do it. Do you see a head? Do you see it? Do you see the head? Doctor, don't drugs, dying. Epidural. Farther, go any farther. Father, for fuck's sakes, for the love of God, forcing, fuck me, fucker, fucking hell, further, a little further, much further. Gah, get it out, get out of me, give me, girlfriend, give it to me, give me something, giving birth, go, God, going, gone. Ha, he, hear it, head, is there a head, help me, her, holy shit, hold it, I can't hold it, wow, husband, hurting, hurts, I am trying, I think it's almost, I'm trying, inside me, is it really happening, it isn't, it's really happening, it just won't, it's happening, Jesus Christ, just, keep it, kill me, oh God, kill me, kill the pain, kill you, labor, law, leave it, leave me alone, ooh, little baby, little boy, little girl, little one, make it me, mom, mommy, motherfucker, my baby, my water broke. Name, no, don't, no, I can't, no, just, no, oh no, oh, baby, oh God, oh my God, oh, ouch, oh, ow, okay, ouch, ow, get it out of me, over yet, ow. Pain, papa, parent, partner, pig, placenta, please help me, pregnant, put me, quit it. Relax, I'm trying to relaxed enough, relaxation, rest, save me, saw, see it, can you see it, shit, sleep, son of a bitch, sorry, stick it, stirrup, stomach, stuck, isn't it, it's stuck, is it stuck, take it out, take me, tap water, it's time to, trying, I am trying to, umbilical, uterus, vagina, very much, very, water, woo, what is it, when will it, where is he, where is it, will I, will it, will he, will she, will they, will you, who, whoa, who, why won't it, worse pain, wow, ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, ex-husband, ex-partner, ex-wife, yeah, Yes, it is. Yes, it's coming. Yes, it did. You bastard. You can't just. You cocksucker. You coward. You have no idea. You have to. You piece of shit. You pig. You motherfucker. You son of a bitch. You'll have to. You'll need to. You're dead to me. You're going to pay. You're not supposed to. You're. And there's nothing for Z because it's Z. Words for Z. That's divisions of labor. I wrote divisions of labor before moving to New York in my early years of graduate school. I made it by transcribing sounds that women made during childbirth scenes in movies I found on YouTube. After the first time I read this in Philadelphia, I was cautioned by a friend of mine on behalf of the mothers at the reading, who whispered their distaste for the poem to each other, that it was a bold move on my part to regard the topic of labor in my poetry as someone who had never been in labor before. This position seemed surprising to me and odd. As someone who was born, I was pretty sure I experienced being literally inside the labor that took place at my own birth, even if I don't remember it. And it seems sad how divided the community had become as a result of inequalities coursing through it. At that time, we as a community were dealing with new statistics finding that female-identifying poets were publishing way less, like 60% the rate of male-identifying poets in the poetry community at the time. And those figures were way less in small press poetry than they were in mainstream publishing. So we were kind of dealing with that as a community. Especially the childbearing people in my community were so hurt by me, a non-childbearing person, regarding their labor, that apparently the idea that it could have come from a place of solidarity was unimaginable. When I wrote this poem, I was processing the disconnect between, on the one hand, getting this liberal arts education, seemingly left-leaning, but on the other hand, training to become a worker in an academic institution where the women were warning me on the side that I shouldn't bother trying to become a professor if I wanted to have children, because I would be held back and never reach equal footing as non-breeding people. I was warned that if I took a break at any point from teaching to have a child, it would count against me on the market. In tenure reviews, I would be labeled not serious as a candidate if I took any such break for caretaking. Then I was advised to choose before finishing my PhD whether to ultimately have a child or leave accordingly if the answer was yes. At that time, I was so desperate to be included to leave, but was concerned by the implication that I had forfeited my right to have a child without owing the university guilt, grief, and income. This began a period of becoming aware of ways that exploitation of childbearing and teaching labor were ubiquitously, invisibly woven into my daily life, which over time became increasingly more opaque to me. I began trying to recuperate my own labor in situations where I wasn't recognized for having labored at all, wherever I could. And I started writing this dissertation about poetics of ubiquity, thinking through Hannah Arendt's idea that, some of the greatest forms of evil are woven into the banalities of daily life. Eichmann in Jerusalem. The problem with Eichmann in Jerusalem was that he was just a guy showing up for work. And it was because what he was doing was so unremarkable that evil was allowed to thrive. There were two epigraphs to divisions of labor that I think resonate here as well. Actually, just one. Sylvia Federici's Precarious Labor and Reproductive Work, she says, once we say that reproductive work is a terrain of struggle, we have to first immediately confront the question of how we struggle on this terrain without destroying the people you care for. This is a problem mothers as well as teachers and nurses know very well. Next, I'm going to read to you Child Labor, which is made out of pornographic penthouse-style accounts of what it's like to enter and be inside of a woman. I cut these up and rearranged them to reconstruct a composite of what it must be like to come out of someone and be born, as told from the narrative perspective of the fetal point of view. And it's organized on the page to look like Alice Notley's Descent of the Lead, where it looks like cut up fragments framed by quotes. Descent of the Lead was this feminist epic that Alice Notley wrote, and the epigraph from that is, there is past, present, and future. The future then cried out, where is my life? Where is my life? You have stolen my life. There was a silence. What it it felt like when I was inside of her, the way she felt when I was inside of her. I mean, I never thought that the stories were true until it happened to me. What it felt like to come into her, and when I came out of her. When I was inside of her, deep in her body, I was so deep in her. I was all the way up to her stomach when I was in her. She felt so small and breakable. I felt so big compared to her soft walls, which kept getting tighter. I had never felt so hard before, and I didn't think I could get any bigger. It was my first time. At first, all of me was inside of her. My little finger, my middle finger, my 2 fingers, 3, my left hand, my right hand. My whole fist was in her, both feet, both legs, my torso, my arms. I was shoulder deep in her, knee deep, dick deep, balls deep in her. My ass, my crotch, covered in her. My head slid all around in her. Her frame felt so tiny when I was inside of her. She was wrapped so tightly around me I couldn't breathe. I wasn't expecting her to be so fragile and soft, which only made me get bigger. The sounds she began to make when I was inside of her, all I could hear were grunts, whimpers, and the slapping of our skin. Those little sounds she made were spellbinding. She was like poetry in motion. I knew I needed to pull out one. I felt her balls start to pulse as she began the hip movements that soon had me moving slowly in and then out. She started begging me to go down all the way, so I turned to go down. I wiggled around a little in her, and her back arched up. I moved in her, all around in her, still way up in her, my tip touching her womb, and I went down, further and further down. I was so down. Our bond cemented when she pushed my face up to her vagina, forcefully and with confidence. It was then that I knew that she was down too, but when I went to enter her pussy just a little bit, she started screaming because it hurt too much. Now, before I entered her pussy, there was no blood at all, but going down made her start to get wet. Every move I made just made her get wetter and wetter. I didn't want to hurt her, so I entered her vagina tentatively. I took my time, and it went real slow at first. She moaned louder and louder with pain. I was just trying not to break her when it was she that gasped in a positive way, letting me know that she was not hurt, but relieved. Her moan of approval made it clear that she liked what I was doing, like she couldn't get enough. Eventually, I stopped trying not to make her bleed and just went for it. I buried my face deep up in her snatch, doing my best to look involved without getting any in my mouth as I entered her pussy. I couldn't not feel the hot wetness. She was so amazingly tight. She was such a perfect fit. My genitals had just barely entered her vagina when it felt as if I had entered heaven. Moving in her tight little hole, her hole felt even tinier, with my junk inside that tight little cunt, my shit all up in her shit. I wanted to scream with pure joy at this wonderful feeling I was experiencing. I mean, I expected it to be warm, but it was hot. I expected it to be wet, but it was soaked. I poked just the tip of my head into the next hole, pushing my head all the way into her other hole. I could feel the blood pumping through her, blood pumping in and out. She was pumping too, my blood pumping, our blood pumping, my fist pumping. We were pumping together. I was so pumped, pumping harder and harder. I kept my mouth closed tightly as I moved around in the mess. Push, I heard her say, so I did. Come on, oh, fuck me, she demanded, bearing down on the bed. She clenched my head between her thighs like she was trying to smother me. I didn't fight it. I was getting into it. Yeah, she agreed. Her body released those juices even louder than her mouth. The grunts coming from the both of us were disturbing. She insisted I pull out regardless, but we waited until I was ready. When I came out, it was like a shock of white light blinding me. There was white stuff all over. Blood was pouring out of her vagina. The bedspread was soaked in a puddle of her juice. A great deal of the slime had slid to the floor. I saw colors in there I'd never seen before. She let out a sigh once I was all the way out. She looked at me, and then at the mess, and back at me, and then started to cry, even harder afterwards than when I was in her. She reached for me and began to run one of her hands along my face. Her touch was so light and warm. She leaned in for a kiss. I leaned back with my eyes closed. She gripped me tighter than ever before, this time with her arms. In that moment, I was hers, and she was mine, and we were the one. Just then, a nurse came up, gave me a tug, and took me back to her room. I was surprised they didn't get jealous of each other, which I would have never imagined would happen in real life. I mean, dreaming about it was one thing, but living it was a whole nother story. So I wrote child labor during the period when I was transitioning from teaching as a graduate student to teaching as an adjunct professor. I entered graduate school in 2008, right when the recession began, and we were told to stay in school because there were no jobs for us, like right as I finished college. And so I believed it was this safe place going to graduate school to shelter me as a writer, because I believe Virginia Woolf that every writer needs a room of her own and financial stability to write, and I believe that the university's commitment was to provide that to intellectuals. I thought that getting a PhD would get me out of poverty for the first time in my life, but the jobs I've since worked at these universities from that time I started have all paid me well below poverty wages ever since. During this period, the American university system, since 2008, has heavily adjunctified itself, eliminating most full-time teaching positions. And now we adjuncts make up more than almost 70% roughly of the total teaching labor in higher education. And hardly any of us are paid enough to live on, let alone to support dependents. While belonging to these progressive, supposedly well-educated learning communities in higher education that brand themselves as carrying the banner of social justice for the next generation, this entire time I've not earned enough to actually afford the minimal cost of raising my own child if I wanted one. Until just 2018, when the Family Leave Act was passed, all of the schools I worked for would have fired me if I missed more than 2 days of work in a row after birthing a child, and would have replaced me if I took that semester off or part of it off for maternity leave. None of these schools pay enough to insure dependent children on their insurance plans that they offer adjuncts, and for those who take the insurance option to cover their children with those plans, they often can spend as much as their entire wages just to cover that cost. With child labor, my poetry began processing the reality that the exploitation of teaching and caretaking labor in my profession had lured me down a path where my choice to have kids felt like it had been taken from me. The traumas handed down through my family line, which were originally caused by austerity, have inhibited my desire to pass that suffering on to the next generation. Both being prevented from choosing and to not have children and choosing to have children are forms of reproductive injustice that we often don't talk about here as workers. I've navigated as a 21st century person in my blue state liberal communities this entire time. So next I'm going to read to you Reproductive Labor, and it starts with an epigraph from Antonio Gramsci's prison notebooks. It goes, "The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born." I think this last poem I'll read, say a few words next time. People keep asking me if I want kids, and I don't know how to answer that. I suspect I might want kids, but I don't know if I want kids because I don't know what wanting kids is supposed to feel like. I'm pretty sure I want to have had kids, in retrospect, only because I don't want to feel like I missed out on anything. But is that what wanting a child feels like? Does it feel similar to the desire to have paid off your bills or to have attended that event you feel obligated to go to but don't have the energy for? What does it feel like to know you want children? Is wanting kids a physical sensation? Like, when you look at other people's kids, do your loins start burning and dilating with want for something to come out of them? I can sort of imagine that. Does looking at a baby make your womb throb, your sperm squirm, your wallet pulse? I don't know, you tell me. I'm not asking to make fun or because I think it's funny. I genuinely want to know, what does wanting kids feel like? When I'm hungry, the emptiness in my stomach makes it ache. Do you feel an emptiness in your torso when you want kids? At a certain point, will I get hangry for a child to fill up my midsection if I wait too long? The minute that it occurs to me that I can have a cigarette, I immediately want one. And if too much time passes after that craving begins, eventually it becomes all I can think about. Is wanting a child like that? Is it a desire that forms out of the realization that you could have one? I mean, I could have had a child at any point. I could have had one when I was 13. But I don't necessarily know whether I want one just because I can have one with the same certainty that I know I want a cigarette at every moment that I can have one. Or is wanting kids just less of an internal feeling or lack of craving belonging to any one body part and more of a holistic, overall physical longing for another? You know, like when you've been single for so long that all you can think about is who among your friends you can convince to spoon you without it getting weird. Is it a body loneliness thing? Or does wanting a child feel like it does when I see a baby animal and all I want to do is hold it? I mean, the last thing I want to do is chores for helpless animals. Those creatures just look like food to me. But I would hold the shit out of any baby animal that would let me. I don't know if that's a baby thing so much as a cuddling thing. Baby animals make great hot water bottles by and large. I would spoon most full-grown animals too, for that matter, provided they have fur and aren't too vicious or smelly. Well, actually, I would spoon an elephant or a hippo, probably also an ostrich, so yeah, most, if not all animals, I would definitely spoon. But wanting to spoon that raccoon rummaging in the trash doesn't necessarily mean I'm prepared to care for it by, say, showing up for all its vaccination appointments. I mean, if I haven't managed to go to any dentist appointments in the last 5 years, how can I be trusted to follow through on vaccinations? I guess it's not totally my fault that I haven't been to the dentist. My insurance only pays for 1 cavity a year, but I have at least 5, which doesn't bode well for my all-or-nothing perfectionism. Is there a distinct feeling between wanting to have that raccoon in my arms and wanting to mother or parent the raccoon is what I'm asking. What does wanting a kid feel like physically? Does it hurt? Does it burn? Does it sting? Does it ache? Or is it coldness or an emptiness you wish to lessen? Or is it really a warmth and a fullness that you wish to share? Everyone I know with kids tells me that their children are the most important things to them in the world. I don't want to die without knowing what the most important thing in the world feels like. So I know I want to know what it feels like to know with certainty what the most important thing in the world feels like. But is that what wanting a child feels like? Because I thought feeling was relative. Wouldn't the most important thing to me now just be replaced by a different most important thing once I had the kid? Thereby not making the second thing more important than the first thing, but instead just substituting one most important thing for a different one. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with caring for different things in life. I don't pity anyone for loving their kids that much. I neither pity nor envy people who want to have kids. Having a kid sounds noble and simplifying. Does wanting children feel anything like preferring to work the one job instead of the 3 I have? Is it part of an urge to simplify your life and consolidate options? I bet if I had a kid, daily decision-making would become way easier. Do I want to stay out at this bar or go home? What city do I want to live in? Can I eat chips for dinner? I'll bet limiting my options would make the answers to these kinds of questions become more obvious. Would having kids liberate my time like a set of productive constraints? Sometimes it feels really good to cook a loved one a meal or do something nice for them, like knit them a scarf or draw them a card. Does wanting a kid feel like the desire to serve another? I don't mean that in a judging way. I'm asking because it seems like there can be pleasure in that. I would love for the act of cooking dinner to feel more like my pleasure than my burden. Chores in general, make them less painful, please. By all means. Living in the service of another sounds easier to me than living in the service of self. Is that how people come to want kids? The need for the object of their desire to be intelligibly, tangibly external from themselves? I can relate to that. I remember what strongly wanting kids felt like when I was a child, but I don't think I'm very good at knowing how to want anything strongly as an adult. It's possible that's because most of the time, I don't feel like I'm much of an adult. I make negative income. Someone else owns my shelter. I'm scared and overstimulated most of the time. I have no assets, and I can't begin to imagine myself in the future. Statements that are just as true today as they were when I was a child. Do you have to strongly not identify with children to want one of your own? Because I don't know how not to feel infantilized by the conditions of my life. In what ways is child wanting an extension of narcissism? I mean this in the healthiest sense of the word. Does it feel like the desire to look in the mirror and, fix your hair? Is that what it is? Or is the feeling of wanting children more like the feeling of wanting to create a world in which others admire you, fear and respect you, like a superiority thing? Is that what it feels like? Because I would be down for that. I never not want that, to be honest. Although that is what Victor Frankenstein also wanted, and look how that turned out. What do you picture when you feel your desire for wanting children? All I can seem to see is a split screen of 2 versions of me on my deathbed. On the left, I'm staring into the eyes of my grown child weeping over me as I lay dying. On the right, I'm just lying there dying, watching the wallpaper peel with no one crying. I'm going to be pissed if no one cries when I die. Is wanting children similar to wanting to make people cry? That sounds kind of awful. Should I be leaning into that desire or leaning away from it? Is there a special kind of loneliness for childlike company when wanting a kid. Most of my friends are artists and are pretty childish, to tell the truth. Like in the way that Freud says, that every child at play behaves like a creative writer, in the sense that they, unlike adults, take pleasure in rearranging the world to their liking. Is that why I never crave the company of children? Because I'm basically surrounded by them most of the time? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not bothered by the presence of children. I wish they were more integrated into adult spaces, just for everyone's sake. But sometimes when I'm having a conversation with a kid, I notice that they can be pretty ignorant compared to adults. Does wanting a child feel similar to the want for simpler times, like a pastoral craving to return to innocence or nature? Most of the time I wish I were camping. Is it like that? Real ignorance is bliss sort of vibe? Is that why people go for it? Or a child wanting people like, well, we basically said all there is to say to each other, so let's just start over from the beginning. Say mama. Can you say mama? Ma, try it. Or does wanting a kid feel like the opposite of the social drive? Is it the desire for social withdrawal? Does the knowledge of wanting a kid only come to you after noticing what a disappointment people ultimately become, and you're just like, fuck this, I'm out of here? Is it like, you people all suck, I'm gonna go make my own people now? Like at a certain point, you just have to make your own people, because all the ones you didn't make are just too obnoxiously not your own. I don't mean this passive aggressively, I mean it honestly. My friends with kids hang out less, but I can also see why. The human race is a real fucking disappointment, you know? I mean, we made global warming. We are trash. No wonder my friends are all withdrawing into their own DIY family worlds. I'd love to build any alternative world to this one at this point, kids or no kids. Is wanting kids a world-building thing or a world-ending thing? Is it a want to make more world or a want for less of this one? Does wanting a kid feel like it does when you realize nothing you manage to do with your life so far is going to leave a substantial enough mark, and the only reliable way to leave one is to imprint it on a kid? Is it a want for legacy or resignation? Or does wanting kids not come out of a lack of influence, but rather a surplus of means to support one? What if I don't feel so strongly about wanting children because I don't have enough ducks in a row? Do I need to be able to afford a child to feel certain about wanting one? What if my owing a lifetime of student debt for a graduate degree, but less job security than my working class parents had, is obscuring my want for children? Is it because I lack the budget for one, or is having less than my parents did stifling my imagination for wanting kids? Do I need to be able to picture a way to reproduce the life they gave me, to want some of my own? Poverty hurts children, but people should have kids regardless of income bracket, right? Ducks or no ducks? Wouldn't expanding the number of what Ezra Pound called the unkillable children of the very poor only increase the population of those able to teach the rest of us how to survive the apocalypses to come? Is there any way to avoid that with the way our economy and ecology are going? What are the chances this world will get worse and not better? Less than 10%? More than 60%? It seems like predictions really matter in family planning. Do I need to be a sadist or want to assign another consciousness to partake in the end of the world? What is the difference between wanting a kid and wishing the end of the world on someone at this point? Surely there are plenty of distinctions that could be made here between the desire to reproduce and the drive to punish. Tell me more about those. I've noticed that my friends in less populated areas had kids earlier and in higher quantities than my friends in cities, and my friends in the most densely populated cities have the fewest kids of them all. What if I don't feel so certain about wanting kids because when I look around, I see no room for them? When you want kids, do you chafe when you notice room for a kid that's not yet filled? I'll bet people in more rural areas look around at their open, underpopulated spaces and are like, we gotta put more people in here. Hardly anyone showed up to this party. We're never gonna eat all these chips before they go stale. When you want kids and you live in a city, do you stand on the crowded subway just like, there's an empty spot in the corner that could fit one, and then stress out about that empty spot going to waste? Is that what wanting children feels like a wish to fill potholes in the road? I don't feel strongly like I do or don't want kids, but I will never turn down the chance to enjoy a good miniature. Kittens, dioramas, baby shoes, Brussels sprouts, enchanting, all of them. I visited the diorama of New York City at the top of the Times Square McDonald's at least two dozen times. By myself, never with people. They always want to leave far sooner than I'm ready. I love being here, but I can't stand any part of its constitution in isolation. Times Square, McDonald's, New York City, each are insufferable in themselves. But combine these into a diorama scenario, and I could spend all day there. Is that a sign I want children? I do love the idea of a diorama person, but I don't know if I like the decor they come with. what kid wanting is really a masked affection for childishly color-coded interior design? Is that how people know they want kids? They walk through the toy section of the store and are like, if I buy these toys, my house can finally have the color palette I've always wanted but never had the courage to own before I got these kids. Or is it the kids who want that stuff, not their parents? I really don't care for neon greens and pinks. If I like those colors, would I want kids more definitely? Does wanting kids feel like the want to surround yourself with certain colors? I know that feeling. Or does wanting children feel like the want for a toy? I know what wanting toys feels like for sure. Are children just toy people? That can be fun. When I wrote reproductive labor, I was struggling to wrap my head around the problem that I couldn't imagine the choice of whether or not to reproduce as a choice, because most life-defining things I'd experienced until that point were things that happened to me, beyond my control. Prior to the overturning of Roe, I had rejected the idea that I had a choice when the option to have a child, child in such labor conditions simply did not seem safe. Academia now offers paid family leave to its full-time staff, but still has made no adjustments to its own standards or offerings of maternity leave to its part-time workers by and large, beyond promising that we will be hired back. And that's a promise, because we're hired semester to semester. We often have no job security. Universities run the local economies of many of the major towns in these red states and have done nothing to disrupt those economies where Roe has been overturned. As someone who might get pregnant, the abortion ban that took effect less than a year after publishing this book has limited my options in my supposedly progressive profession already. Just a few weeks ago at age 39, I had a miscarriage at the end of my first trimester, the first and only pregnancy I ever had. And throughout the fall of this year, while I was applying for full-time jobs in academic positions around the country while I was pregnant, I was struck by the way in which I did not feel safe applying for professor positions in states where abortion was illegal. Pregnant people need safe access to abortions and other forms of maternal health care to protect their own ability to survive pregnancy, both physically and financially. And I feared for how I could die of complications just from all of the legal hand-tying that doctors now face as they manage the fallout of the Supreme Court's decision, like just the time it takes to actually move on getting a woman care when she needs it in the medical office is now like a site of trauma for many people, and it's a site where like deaths are happening as a result. This year I ended up not applying to more than 2/3 of those academic jobs offered in my field that I was qualified for, because the majority of those offered were in red states where I'd be voluntarily forfeiting rights to control my own reproductive timeline and future by moving to them. We think the lack of women in literature right now is bad, and it's only going to get worse because of this. I'm certain of this. And luckily, just a few weeks ago, this is the good news, is my union at NYU passed a contract that would get us adjuncts raises that are just high enough to support the cost of a dependent. And that's like, we're not like the highest paid adjuncts in the country as a result of this. It's a huge thing that passed. This is why I finally feel like I can even talk about any of this history in narrative form, because some of it's now finally behind me. But having a baby still has cut in half my opportunities in my field to earn a full-time livelihood, even though I haven't had one yet. And it has cut my opportunities as a writer as well. I recently spent a full day a little while back researching whether it would even be safe to accept an offer to give a poetry reading I was invited to give in New Orleans, in what would have been the late stages of my second trimester. I didn't know what would be the protocol if I needed medical attention, what my insurance would cover, and my insurance barely knew because of this new legislation. I was trying to figure out what my exit strategy would be if something happened. My point here is that while we live in this blue state and it's legal here, we don't have the luxury in this country of believing we're separate from or immune from the problems that it poses to all of us. At least I can't. And academia has made no adjustments to its own standards or offerings of maternity leave to its part-time workers like me during this period. Universities run the local economies of many of these major towns in these red states. I already said that. So just to conclude, I stopped writing Fetal Position when I realized this pattern of the victim narrative that was running through the stories I was telling myself about my life over the course of my writing this book. I stopped making Fetal Position the day I noticed the uniformity of that victim narrative running through it, because I no longer wanted to identify with that, the helpless. Because now I want to begin working to recognize my own culpability and capability to transfer harm. Getting people to collectively identify with their own victimhood was a technique that Nazis used to mobilize occupation. It's now the propaganda on conservative talk radio that's designed to convince conservatives to identify with victimhood enough to mobilize belief in their right to take things that don't belong to them, like other people's civil, medical, and reproductive rights. When I told my therapist, who's 10 years older than me, and also went through a PhD program, about the cautions I was given as a woman in my corner of academia against having kids, she was totally shocked to hear it, because the field of psychology has way more women in it than in literature, and she had never encountered this form of negative solidarity in her own PhD experience. My experience is not special, but it's also not a baseline. The inequality is not evenly distributed. Writing poems to process this stuff for so many years, undergoing thousands of hours of therapy on top of that, I had become aware that I have a capacity to be most victimizing to others the more that I identify as victimized. And so all my work's kind of shifted now to focus on that. All that fear I had learned was taught to me by fellow women in my field who had been through their own histories of violence against their gender and reproductive autonomy. And I latched onto those stories because of the primer of my own history with abuse. I made fetal position to resist passing on violence as I proceeded to produce the pain of violence done to me. To close, I just want to say thank you for the invitation for this reading series and its mission. In my life, the poem has provided me a formal outlet that because poetry in itself has no rules, it can give us a place to put it, all of it, victim narratives and all. And in my life, it has kept me from killing those who have hurt me. So I highly recommend it as a form. Thank you for coming to this talk. Guys, thanks for having me.
Yes, let's have a Q&A. Questions, comments?
I'm curious about your decision to get your cat and how that played into it, because in my mind I view like pets as sort of like you're still a parent to the pet.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's like obviously a very different experience because you're not like physically birthing it,
Mm-hmm.
but like I was like kind of curious about like how your like cat went into like, other than like the poem you wrote with like things you had said to your cat,
Mm-hmm.
like how you're like how that decision came about, like whether that was reflected in any of your other poetry.
Yeah, I mean, he comes up a lot. There's another piece in this Lesser Person that's also all about him. I got him, he has 3 legs, and in my family, so my family is like just riddled with mental illness, and all the Melgards have a thing for animals. Like, we're just all obsessed with animals, and they all have pets, and they're always like coddling their pets. And I think it's like a comforting thing, right? Because we're all like walking around with all this like trauma that we're passing back and forth between each other. And so I just, I needed a someone.
Yeah.
And so it was very much like an emotional servant arrangement. My cat and my son together as one in my lifestyle. But so I mean, he's like he's a place to put it. He's my little emotional guy. And also, like, I think a lot about his autonomy as an animal. Like, animals don't get language, so of course, or the languages we recognize, so of course we project our narratives onto them. And so I've written a lot of poems kind of around that reflective surface of the one that can speak but cannot testify, or something, like the one that we could project onto, and like what that one's life must be like or something. So I think about, he's like my muse. I write a lot, most of my poems like they begin and end with him. Yeah, please.
Do you find that, like, age plays any role in like the discrimination in the workplace, as far as like, oh, like you're getting an application of like a woman in her 30s, like we would maybe not want to hire her because maybe she wants to have children soon, and like, or then like maybe as you grow older, then that goes away, and kind of how ageism plays into this.
I'm sure it plays different parts, and I mean, yeah, and I think it's played different roles at different moments in my life. Like, asking in different interviews I've given about my marital status, or my, oh, I see you have no gaps in your CV in terms of your timeline. There's always like these weird like side comments that are made. There's often a monitoring for that. And now it's like the Family Leave Act, like it's become very illegal to discriminate against it just since 2018. So we have language for it, and it's more enforced in the private sector. In academia, Becky Cooper has this really interesting argument that like meritocracy being older than democracy is therefore capable of protecting older forms of power and oppression that democracy was designed to overthrow. And I feel like I've seen that through this experience, because in the private sector, like my friends who work at fucking Google or whatever, I mean, they have their own problems, but like there's recourse at those jobs legally. And in an adjunct arrangement where you're just not hired back semester to semester, there really is there's no recourse, like there's no tracking of the problem a lot of the time. Now the arrangement for most teaching labor in the university is just set up for there to not be recourse. So it's illegal, and it's like easier now to prosecute or to sue if it seems like retaliation for getting pregnant, which is the good news. And we're making a lot of progress, but it's just, to me, it's wild that like I'm like a 21st century person, like I'm a born digital person. Like this has been my life. Like really, like when I read this, I feel like I'm listening to my grandma's stories, you know, and like, but it's coming out of my mouth. Which is crazy. I saw a hand over here, and then over there. Yeah, Nick.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for this talk. It's really interesting. And then I was wondering, because in recent years there has been this tendency of reframing victimhood narratives into survival narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering this, what do you think, whether reframing that as survival narratives is enough to inhibit like someone's capacity to inflict harm on others, or whether you think that a more radical reframing is necessary?
I mean, yeah, I would hope that a more radical reframing would be necessary. Like Mark Fisher says that like those narratives of self-transformation is like the only consolation we get in a world with this much abuse that's this ubiquitous, you know, and like that and that the self-transformation is what's needed because we live in this neoliberal universe where the problem falls on the mother and isn't taken as a social ill at large, which it is, right? Like if the mothers are suffering, everybody grows up more fucked up for it. So we think that it belongs to an individual, but I think in this work, this whole book was kind of a meditation on the limit point of thinking through a category of a person as an individual, like motherhood, because it's something that I lived my whole life in relation to. Like as a kid, you know, my guy friends were getting like actual toys to play games, and I was getting toys to practice being a mother. And like, so even before, during, and after that event that may or may not transpire, like it's such a focal point in how we project gender or something. And so, anyways, my point is just that like we live in a world where we're psyched out as though something's wrong with us as individuals in relation to that thing, but actually like it's through the fiction that it's an individual problem, not a collective problem. I think that that capitalism is able to exploit and monetize it or something. I think. That would be Fisher's argument. I'm just going to plagiarize Fisher's argument. So he has good ideas. That's all I can agree with it.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. There was something like of a surprise ending to it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not wrong, then the question would be this. So it seemed like at the end, if I understood, you were saying that you had moved away from what you referred to as the victim narrative, that these poems that you were reading, the text you were reading that was a victim narrative, that in your current work, you're turned away from.
Mm-hmm.
You turned away from it in part because it seems to reproduce kind of violence on the people who would read it or hear it. So what, again, if that's correct, what I'm wondering is what your relationship is now to that work, and how you think about presenting it publicly. If you've had this realization about it that's made you turn away from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the frame of Fetal Position ended up kind of being, early on they were the labor poems, and then it became Fetal Position when I realized the positioning of the person in the defensive stance who's convinced of the victim narrative, who then becomes much more reactive and violent and destructive as a result. And so, just seeing the pattern, I was like, I need to stop this mode and regroup. And this is really the first time that I've talked about my history and my biography in relation to these poems. Like I've really kept it out of writing. I never talk about it in written interviews. You know, I've never put any of that history in writing. And like, I think that's because it's really easy for readers to look at a person's story and to say that that story is what the poem says. so easily that I don't want it to exist in a written economy. And maybe someday I will. Maybe I'll be less controlling of my own work in the world, which I should learn to be. But in the meantime, so like thinking about that framing, so far it's been like, oh, keep that out of writing. But then I also see that there's like an opportunity now with the overturning of Roe, since this took place, to really have a more open dialogue. Like, I think that the most political thing we can do is put what we're told is our personal problem in public and start dealing with the fact of how it is symptomatic of institutional failings, right? And so, to me, if beginning to talk about that history is useful to that end, like, let's do it, or something, is my thinking. Since this book, I started making this other book. It's called Inner Critic, a journal of inner criticism. And it's just documenting everything my critic was saying as I was trying to put this book together and out in the world for years, but not letting myself put it out, being afraid that if I put my work out in the world and made it available in object form, it would only make it too available to become then abused and maimed and destroyed. And so that book is really kind of like tracing the kind of internalization of violence from one narrative point of view. And so I'm still thinking through these things, and so the work is now changing to kind of think through these things from different angles, is my point. That there's the framing around the work, and I'm still playing with the framing, and then there's the framing that happens in the work, in the retrospect of the work that came before. That's all there. I don't know if that answers it. I'm not satisfied, but it's a great question. Thank you. Other questions? Comments? Yeah, please.
I have a comment.
Sure.
Just like how you were answering to Tom's question, made me think that like there is an ability. It was striking to me that you described this inability of finishing the book as not giving it out to violence or whatever would happen to it. But sometimes I think the inability to finish the book and the function of being a critic is that because it's so enjoyable in many ways to be with that work, and wanting that to be yours and not of the world.
Totally.
So, like it's not wanting to give birth. Like if
Yeah.
you want to like take it there, right?
But
Like,
then you create a world that you want to live in, and then you live there. And then how do you walk away from it?
but like somehow that just made sense the way you were talking about this, and you were also saying how like you're not ready to put your narrative out there in the world because you don't want the world to use that narrative to read your poems.
Or as a
right?
substitute for the poem.
Yeah. No. So comment, no question.
I like that. Yeah, please.
I'm curious about, I'm sure not everyone's seen it, so maybe you hold it up, but the cover of your book.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what your thought process was behind it, because I was thinking about this event through the lens that we planned this series, Autonomies, and I thought that this image actually sort of worked perfectly in sort of a grim way about in illustrating a certain response we can have collectively to a crisis.
Yeah.
This kind of thing that happens in schools, like that's practiced, and that's something that you do together. As grim as that is, it's something that's pre-thought in response to a crisis, and it's a collective protection of one's autonomy and safety. So
it's how we're taught to experience attack and respond to attack. Get in the fetal position under your desk. And this, I made this. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
What were you gonna say?
you didn't.
I got excited. It's my control issue. No, I made this from. This is originally developed from not active shooter drills. It's made to look like active shooter drills, but it's from the drop and cover drills from nuclear bomb, the threat of nuclear war during the Cold War. So it's like using that, but obviously it's like playing off of the active shooter drill. When I was growing up, it was like earthquake drills. We had a lot of those in Seattle. Your fetal positions on the board. So it's like here we're being taught how to respond, and each generation is kind of handing down this same arrangement in the classroom. Like how many generations have we gotten into this position together and been talked to about how to get into this position together, right? And that's like kind of crazy. Like as an American narrative, we live in fear of the other shoe dropping or something. there's comfort in the familiar. Like, not when you let go of the book, like, the fetal position is more familiar to me. It's more comfortable, it makes more sense. Serving other people is more familiar to me. It's comfortable, it makes more sense. Serving myself is very scary and painful to me. Like, I barely know how to inhabit that, right? And so, like, could the new actually emerge from history? Is, like, kind of one of the big questions that the work is trying to contend with. And I don't think that we have narratives to really answer that question yet. Like, or is it that the old is dying and the new cannot be born when we look at scenes like this in our history that just keep repeating and repeating and repeating? Where is there room for something different to emerge in these arrangements, you know? It's just I know it's a question I have. Yeah, please.
One thing that really struck me when you were reading the alphabet, the labor poem, was that I have never imagined giving birth.
Really?
And this despite the fact that, like you know, I was raised traditionally female in many ways, and was raised to imagine being a mom, you know, like casually in play.
Yeah. When you have children, did you have that kind of speech directed at you when you were growing up?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
But you didn't imagine it.
But so there's this weird gap between being socialized female and being so not acquainted, so forced into the familiarity with the female role, the mothering role. But then there's a lack of imagining the actual thing, which I find it just struck me.
Yeah, and a lack of like hearing and sight for the actual thing. Like the ubiquity of violence against mothers in this country is so intense. Like a friend of, Amanda Monti, who's been writing, another Buffalo alum, she's been writing about the hot mess mom and how much like capitalism, like a lot of the things that we celebrate and sell in culture are arranged to respond to the genre of motherhood today, which is to look like a hot mess and to be too exhausted to function and to work too many jobs and to be under-resourced and to do too many things. And like, where did this aesthetic habit come from for imagining what the mother is? And like, where did our blindness for like the many layers of like violence against a person's like basic quality of life, where did that even come from? So like, there's a lot of violence just existing in our field of view that's just like invisible because we're so fucking used to it. And it like we see right through it or something. So it's crazy because it's like I was so gendered and prepared to do this work, and then what the mainstream actually has an ear for and an eye for of that work is like lacks imagination, as you exactly said, and it lacks an attention span for it. Like it lacks an attention span for like a slow motion tragedy we've been living through for many generations now in this country, the way it treats its women and its mothers. And the female identifying people.
Final question?
So at a certain point you make the connection between using, like, so you just said, you talked about using humor as a coping mechanism for trauma. And I don't know if you've watched Nanette by Hannah Gadsby, which is a book.
I have.
Wonderful. And at a certain point she just talked about how very often the humor as a coping mechanism for trauma just ends up being self-deprecation, and so it just ends up being something, so like repeating the abuse that one experienced through self-deprecation. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
I have thoughts about Annette. I read this really, I can't remember who wrote it, but I remember reading this essay that was kind of responding to it, thinking about now the convention that women must they must speak about their trauma in order to enter into discourse or something, and that this is now becoming an increasing like convention in the literature of female identifying writing or something. And at the same time, like I appreciate Nanette, I appreciate Hannah Gadsby's like thinking about humor, but I don't know, like in trauma studies, so like, did you guys read The Body Keeps the Score? Like Bessar Van Kolk writes about polyvagal theory. So there's this like nerve in the body, supposedly. There's this nerve in the body that is responsible, it's connected to the frontal lobe, and it's part of what connects you to detecting danger in your loved ones around you. And this nerve is what we feel when we say something is heart-stopping or gut-wrenching, things that affect our empathy, we feel it in here. And often it's felt and shown through how we align our rhythms with other people. So if we're having a conversation and you and I are both laughing, that laughter then signals that we are both safe in each other's company. Whereas if I'm laughing and you're not, or you're laughing and I'm not, there's a feeling of unsafety there because our rhythms aren't aligned in like a fundamental way. So polyvocal theory right now is kind of developing theory in trauma studies that's really thinking through how palliative the alignment of rhythms actually is. And they've been finding in studies on just medications for PTSD that more effective than any other pharmaceutical we have, simply doing improv or playing in a band in a group of people has more palliative effects on just reversing the injury of trauma in survivors of war and atrocity than any other pharmaceutical we have. That just like that practice of aligning rhythms is more medicinal in its function than any other treatment for trauma we have. So we can say, sure, it's self-deprecating, but I don't know, maybe we shouldn't limit our opportunities of what could be done with the form of laughter. Maybe we actually need a lot more fucking laughter now. As someone who survived a lot of shit, if I didn't have laughter, I really wouldn't be here. And poetry is such an unfunny place today. And how, it's an unfunny fucking place, and there's not enough women in it, and no one's fucking laughing, and it's just it's scorched earth. How do we move forward from here? And put more laws in it. Thank you for that question. And thank you guys for having me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Filling that out.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Our communication process. Yeah, okay. We'll read this. Yeah.